We're at the start of, well, a historical reckoning, a cultural restoration, and a spiritual confrontation with centuries of distortion. Let's lay it out like a manifesto, backed by unsurmountable proofs, and structured into a documentary. Let's go. Giyur, Jewish conversion, is the formal process of becoming Jewish. Converts are traditionally given the designation Ben Avraham v'Sarah, meaning son of Abraham and Sarah, or Bat Avraham v'Sarah, daughter of Abraham and Sarah, linking them, spiritually only, to the ancestors of Judaism. Now let's talk DNA evidence. Genetic studies show that modern converted Jewish populations, Ashkenazi, Sephardi, Mizrahi, carry between about 1.8 and 4.9% sub-Saharan African ancestry. This likely comes from intermixing roughly 2,000 years ago during trade and migration. Palestinians, Samaritans, and Bedouins show direct genetic continuity with ancient Levantine populations, including Israelites and Canaanites. Haplogroups like E1b1b, J1, and T1a are found in both African and Semitic populations, especially in Ethiopia, Somalia, and Sudan, which, honestly, suggests shared ancestral roots. Languages like Ge'ez, Amharic, Tigrinya, and Tigray are Semitic tongues native to Africa and part of the Afro-Asiatic family. These languages preserve biblical grammar, vocabulary, and syntax, and are still spoken today, unlike Yiddish, which was revived artificially and is, let's be real, a Germanic Slavic-influenced language. They show us that ancient Israelite and Semitic identity isn't exclusive to the Middle East. It's deeply, historically, African. The Kebra Nagast is Ethiopia's right to biblical lineage. Written in Ge'ez and completed around 1,700 years ago, but actually written even earlier, the Kebra Nagast, meaning Glory of Kings, holds the story of descent from Solomon and the Queen of Sheba and their son, Menelik I. It legitimized the African heritage of the Solomonic dynasty, which ruled Ethiopia until 1974. The text links Ethiopia to the Ark of the Covenant, claiming it was brought to Axum by Menelik. Scholars show its roots go back to around 1000 BCE and 970 BCE. King Solomon reigned from about 970 to 931 BCE, and Queen Makeda, or the Queen of Sheba, flourished in the 10th century BCE, blending biblical, Egyptian, and African royalty. Carbon dating first put the book at 1700 years old, but unreleased canons have pages over 2,000 years old. In fact, the older the story, the more ancient the book tested. Solomon and Sheba, memory, DNA, and the bloodline. The Kebra Nagast and Ethiopian tradition tell us that the Ethiopian lineage descends from Solomon and Sheba, a union that symbolizes divine heritage and the African unification of continental royalty. Archaeological finds in Jerusalem suggest sub-Saharan inscriptions from the time of Solomon, possibly linked to Sheba's trade. This story has shaped Ethiopian identity, Rastafarian theology, and Pan-African consciousness. Yiddish, is really a language of diaspora, not of origin. It actually emerged way back in 9th century Germany, blending Middle High German with Hebrew, Aramaic, and some Slavic elements. Over time it became the everyday language of Ashkenazi Jews, but interestingly it has no linguistic connection at all to ancient Judean Hebrew. Its rise reflects, convert adaptation rather than ancestral continuity, so it's really a cultural construct, not some kind of biblical inheritance. Law of return, legalized appropriation. Drafted in 1944 and then enacted in 1950, Israel's law of return grants automatic citizenship to European Jewish converts, even if they're strictly of European ancestry. At the same time, it excludes Palestinians, even those with direct ancestral ties to ancient Israel. This law has enabled, mass migration, migrant demographic engineering, and settler colonialism, which actually mirrors underhanded and deceptive tactics used in North America against all indigenous peoples. Land theft and settler violence really follow a colonial blueprint. Today, over 700,000 immigrant settlers live illegally in the West Bank, protected by military, American, and IDF forces. United Nations reports confirm systematic violence, including arson, livestock theft, home demolitions, and forced displacement. These are, unfortunately, the mainstay of colonial evils. In 2024 alone, Israel seized over 12,700 dunams of Palestinian land, marking the largest grab since the Oslo Accords. These acts honestly mirror colonial atrocities in the United States and Canada: land theft, cultural erasure, and legal disenfranchisement. All of these are considered war crimes. European Jewish identity culture versus biblical lineage. Rabbinic Judaism is built on the Talmud, which is a compilation of oral law written centuries after the Torah. The Torah is the foundational text, but many Jewish sects like the Karaites and Samaritans actually reject the Talmud's authority. Jewish identity today is often appropriated as cultural, shaped by, false or constructed language, law, and diaspora, rather than biblical lineage. The shift from Torah-based identity to Talmudic legalism marked a major deviation from ancient Israelite spirituality. It's become an antichrist religion, not retaining the original biblical narrative. So, let's talk about appropriations and erasures. European Jews adopted Hebrew names, biblical symbols, and Middle Eastern aesthetics, all to claim indigeneity. But many Ashkenazi surnames were actually assigned by imperial decree, not inherited from biblical ancestors. The revival of Hebrew and the use of Zionist mythology has, honestly, repackaged diaspora identity as some kind of ancient legitimacy, while ignoring the truth, the Bible, and even the genetics required to claim biblical lineage. The telling of this history is, in fact, restoring a stolen narrative. Palestinians, they carry the genetic, linguistic, and cultural essence of ancient Israel, not the European conversion diaspora, and African Semitic traditions are much older and more authentic than European constructs. We're talking about the difference between 1000 BCE to 800 CE, meaning 3,000 years in Judean Africa, and less than 1200 in Yiddish or converted European Jewish communities. The current conflict in Gaza, it's not just political, it's spiritual colonization as well as physical. It's phase 2 of a colonial infiltration. Solomon and Sheba are a living testament to divine heritage, the Ethiopian dynasty and African heritage. This is designed to be clear, powerful, and really irrefutable. Let's look at the evidence, starting with genetic lineage. There's DNA continuity in Palestinians, direct genetic links to ancient Canaanites and Israelites through Y-DNA J1, J2, and E1B1B. On the other hand, Ashkenazi Jews show significant European maternal ancestry, often from medieval converts, with as little as 1.8% Sephardic or ancient Semitic lineage. Now, language and culture, Yiddish is a diaspora construct. It's a Germanic language formed in exile, not native to ancient Judea. The revival of Hebrew, that's a cultural rebranding. Modern Hebrew was reconstructed in the 19th century. In Africa, it was banned, altered, and honestly not spoken out loud for about 1700 years. When it comes to the law of return, which was enacted in 1950, it grants citizenship to converted Jews worldwide, especially European genetic converts, while denying return to displaced Palestinians. Land theft is another layer settler expansion in the West Bank, with over 700,000 settlers living illegally in occupied territories, protected by the Israeli military. There are documented cases of home demolitions, arson, livestock theft, and settler violence, armed displacement of Palestinians. Name appropriation is also significant, forced surname adoption in Eastern Europe to Jewish heritage names. As European names became associated and appropriated with non-genetic Israeli heritage, it reflected the history of Khazar and Ashkenazi descendants. Cultural erasure is real too, the destruction of Palestinian heritage sites, with over 90% of Gaza's schools, libraries, and cultural centers destroyed since 2023. Scriptural discontinuity is clear. Talmudic or Antichrist Judaism actually diverges from Torah-based ancient Israelite practices. Rabbinic Judaism centers on post-biblical texts, and many sects even reject the Talmud's use. The Kebra Nagast, the Ethiopian rite to Solomonic lineage, chronicles descent from Solomon and Sheba, linking African Semitic identity to biblical Israel. African Semitic languages like Ge'ez, Amharic, and Tigrinya preserve Semitic grammar and heritage, spoken in Africa for over 2,000 years, which is older than revived Hebrew, and a cultural dialect of the ancient Semitic language family. Colonial parallels? They mirror North American settler colonialism, land theft, cultural suppression, and legal erasure of indigenous peoples in Canada and the USA, including the governments and peoples involved. Spiritual displacement is the final thread. Palestinians embody ancestral connection to the land. Their presence, language, and customs reflect continuity with ancient Israelite identity. Meanwhile, most test groups of European converts showed a minuscule 2% Sephardic descent. Now let's turn to the biblical account and the Song of Solomon. These are ancient voices that still resonate today. Evidence from 1 Kings chapter 10 and 2 Chronicles chapter 9 tells us about Makeda, or Sheba, who arrives with a caravan of spices, gold, and jewels, and is absolutely awed by Solomon's wisdom. In Song of Solomon 5:10, the male figure, often interpreted as Solomon, is described as robed in white and ruddy, which in ancient Hebrew poetry could actually suggest a black complexion with a reddish hue. Later versions, though, change it to white and ruddy, almost as if there's an attempt to alter African history. But over millennia, especially in African and Ethiopian traditions, the verse "I am black and beautiful" has been embraced as a declaration of dignity and divine beauty. This table is your evidence map, a tool to expose the layers of appropriation, displacement, and historical distortion. Thanks for watching.